Let's do another Avatar Bible study. Now, I've already talked about Ozai in the original series being a form of a Dark Father figure. Well, in the new Aang the Last Airbender movie, we have a new villain, Taga. He is also a form of a Dark Father figure for Aang. He is an adversary that represents the shadow of Aang's desire to restore his culture, his people, their nomads. There's a biblical moment that we can draw parallels from when Aang breaks Avatar Sonam's staff. So, of course, I asked Haven AI about moments that a staff and a breaking of a staff. We'll be focusing on Zachariah 11. The prophet Zachariah breaks the staff named Beauty as a sign of the breaking of the covenant between God and his people. It goes on to say, in the context of Zachariah's prophecy, the breaking of the staff Beauty is a sign of God's judgment and discipline on his people. However, as you mentioned, there's also a promise of restoration and unity in the future. This is a theme that's woven throughout the Bible, where God promises to one day bring his people together in unity and harmony. The last part of it says, it's interesting that you bring this up because it reminds me of Psalm 133:1, which says, behold how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. God desires for his people to be united, and when we are, it's a beautiful thing. In this context, Zachariah's prophecy, the breaking of the staff Beauty and the bands is a call for repentance and a reminder of God's covenant with his people. Now, in the Avatar movie, Aang, The Last Airbender, which takes place after the events of Avatar The Last Airbender, the original series, but before the sequel series, The Legend of Korra, when Aang's around 20 years of age. The 100-Year War is over. He's establishing Republic City, place where everyone from all the nations can live in harmony. He's still suffering the weight of being the last of his people, seeing every nation come together except for his, because he's the last one. When he learns about Avatar Sonam's spiritual staff that can create new airbenders, Aang finds Avatar Sonam's staff with the help of Taga, the movie's antagonist, villain, Dark Father figure, and shadow representative of Aang's desire to hold on to and reestablish his people, his culture, their nomads. Taga is an even more ancient airbender who was frozen for even longer than Aang, from a time where the airbenders was almost wiped out by an earlier version of the Earth Kingdom. Now, unlike Aang, who rejected the call of the hero and wasn't there when the Fire Nation attacked the air temples, Taga was with his fellow air nomads when the Earth Kingdom was fighting them. So he was hardened by the sight of war and death, and so when he wants to bring the air nomads back, he wants to make them stronger so they can defend themselves. He has no problem throwing away and setting aside the pacifist side of the air nomad's philosophy to do so. So Taga is showing Aang that he can become something like a Ozai, like this Nietzschean quote. Now, of course, the Dark Father is the shadow side of the king in the archetypes of the mature masculine. It's the polar back and forth of the positive and negative shadows of the king. Now, Taga's grief has corrupted his energy. In Iron John, a book about men by Robert Bly, Bly talks about the doorway of ashes going through the wound, grief being the doorway to a mature masculine threshold, and the Dark Father being that threshold guardian. And so when Taga gets a hold of Avatar Sonam's staff, his dark energy corrupts it and consumes him. His shadow consumes himself, which is showing Aang what could happen to him. Taga decides to give the ability to airbend to save his people to the Deniers, a terrorist group of non-benders who just want power, who they don't care for preserving air nomad culture, philosophy, any of that. So Taga could also represent the false shepherd that God sends, which connects to like the origin of the Avatar with the original drawing of Aang being a shepherd. Aang, the Christ Messiah hero archetype, represents the true Messiah. So he decides he should lead his people and no one else should have that power, or they should be following a false shepherd, you could say. And so Aang decides to break Sonam's staff. Now, in Zachariah, there's a part of the prophecy where it is said that it will be put back together, unified. We can also see that in the Avatar universe, in Avatar The Legend of Korra, where Korra opens up the portals at the North and South Pole. She essentially lifts the veil so humans and spirits can live side by side again during the harmonic convergence, which causes people from around the world to wake up with the ability to get airbend, because everything kind of gets reset, rebalances. And so we have a new Air Nation then. And Korra, Aang's next reincarnation, and Aang's children shepherds them.